Imagine you're negotiating for a used bike online,
Okay.
and the person on the other end just seems to counter your every move perfectly.
Right, like they're reading your mind.
Exactly. They know exactly when to push back, when to yield, and, you end up paying a little more than you originally wanted.
Which happens to all of us.
It does. But what you don't know in this scenario is that you weren't negotiating with a human at all.
Yeah.
You're getting completely outplayed by an autonomous AI agent.
Which is a terrifying thought.
It really is. And that invisible disadvantage, well, over a single 7-day window in late April 2026, Anthropic basically built an entire global empire on it.
They really did. I mean, it was a week that fundamentally fractured the whole artificial intelligence landscape.
Yeah.
We saw unprecedented financial scale, but it was paired with these incredibly fragile security realities.
Right. And so the mission for this deep dive is clear. We are looking exclusively at the absolute whirlwind of activity from Anthropic
Yeah.
between April 19th and April 25th.
Right, just that 1 week.
Just that week, we're going to sift through the dense technical postmortems, the financial filings, and the cybersecurity reports from those specific 7 days.
Because there's a lot to get through for you guys.
There really is. Our goal is to help you understand the massive architectural shifts happening in AI right now. Because this was the week the industry stopped asking if AI would disrupt the enterprise.
Yeah.
And started asking how to survive the disruption that has already arrived.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to really understand the billions of dollars changing hands later in the week, we have to start with the technology itself.
Makes sense.
Right. We need to look at what these AI agents are actually doing out in the wild to justify these astronomical valuations.
Right. And to see that, we can look at an experiment published by Anthropic's Societal Impacts Research Team.
The Project Deal one, right?
Yes, Project Deal. They set up a controlled marketplace right in San Francisco. It looked just like a standard Craigslist-style Slack board.
Yeah.
But they had Claude agents autonomously negotiating deals for dozens of actual employees.
And that word right there, autonomously, that is the critical piece of the puzzle here.
Right, because the humans weren't typing.
Exactly. The humans simply set a financial goal. They just said, I want to sell this desk lamp for around $30.
Yeah.
And from that point on, the AI agents handled the entire back and forth negotiation completely on their own.
Which is wild. They negotiated over 180 deals across hundreds of listed items, transacting over $4,000 in total.
Wow.
But the finding that really caught my eye was the financial disparity.
The margin difference.
Yeah. Sellers who were represented by the more advanced Claude Opus model, they earned an estimated $2.68 more per item compared to those using weaker models.
And the humans on the other end?
The human buyers had absolutely no idea.
None at all. And that is what researchers are calling the invisible capability gap.
Invisible capability gap.
Right. The human participants were completely unable to detect that they were being out-negotiated by a superior AI.
Wow.
Now, you might be thinking, $2.68 doesn't sound like much on a used bicycle or a desk lamp.
Right, it's pocket change.
But you have to scale that up. Imagine that invisible margin applied to millions of automated microtransactions.
Or like high-frequency B2B supply chain contracts.
Exact.
But wait, if the AI is quietly negotiating better deals for me, and the other human doesn't even know they're talking to a machine,
Yeah.
aren't we essentially just weaponizing information asymmetry?
We absolutely are. What's fascinating here is the macroeconomic implication of this research.
How so?
Well, if superior AI models can generate invisible but highly substantial financial advantages in a marketplace, then access to the absolute best frontier model is no longer optional.
Right, it's not just a perk.
It becomes a baseline requirement for economic survival. It transitions from a neat productivity tool into a competitive mandate.
That makes total sense.
If your competitor has Opus and you have a weaker model, you will lose margin on every single deal, and you won't even realize why.
Which honestly makes perfect sense of the second piece of research they released that week.
The economic survey.
Yeah, Anthropic Economic Research published this massive global survey of 81,000 users. They wanted to track how Claude's capabilities correlate with job displacement anxieties.
And what's fascinating here is the stark psychological reality the data revealed.
Yeah.
The highest productivity gains are actively correlating with the highest displacement anxiety.
I found that detail staggering, especially for early career professionals.
Oh, absolutely.
You're using this tool to get your work done twice as fast. You're getting praised for your output.
Right.
but you're staring at the very tool doing the work, realizing it might not actually need you at the keyboard next year.
Exactly. The workforce is experiencing the massive benefits of automation while simultaneously recognizing their own potential obsolescence.
Yeah, it's a huge contradiction.
It creates a profound psychological whiplash. People can actively feel that invisible margin creeping up on their own jobs.
So true. Now, those incredible autonomous capabilities we saw in Project Eel, those are exactly why enterprise demand for Claude is exploding.
Unprecedented demand, yeah.
But that extreme demand is putting immense strain on Anthropic's actual product stability.
And we really saw that strain break out into the open on their engineering blog.
We did, because for weeks, developers have been complaining that Claude Code was degrading.
Everyone was saying it.
Yeah, users were saying the model was getting forgetful, that it was repeating itself, and that it just couldn't plan complex software architecture anymore.
Everyone assumed the AI was getting dumber.
Right. But Anthropic published this highly transparent engineering postmortem that proved it was something else entirely.
Yeah, it wasn't the underlying intelligence of the model itself. The neural network hadn't changed at all.
It was the software built around it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
the scaffolding.
Right. It's like we assumed the V8 engine broke, but really, the manufacturer just accidentally installed a clogged fuel filter and a faulty steering wheel.
That's a great analogy.
If the wrapper around the engine is broken, the car still isn't going to drive.
That is a perfect way to look at it. Becoming a smarter consumer of AI means understanding the difference between the model weights, which is the raw brain,
Right.
and the scaffolding. The scaffolding is everything else. It's the caching, the API routing, the system prompts.
And Anthropic detailed 3 specific bugs in their scaffolding that caused this degradation.
Right. Yes. They mentioned a reasoning default downgrade in early March, which they did just to save latency.
Make it faster.
Right. Then a caching bug a few weeks later that repeatedly wiped Claude's thinking history.
Ouch.
And finally, a strict verbosity prompt in mid-April.
Okay, what does that mean?
They essentially told the model to use fewer words between tool calls.
And that verbosity cap is a brilliant example of how fragile this technology really is.
It really is.
Because you might think telling an AI to be concise is a good thing.
Right. Keep it brief.
But large language models literally think by outputting tokens. Those words are their scratch pad.
Exactly.
When you restrict how many words a model can output, you effectively lobotomize its ability to reason through a complex coding problem.
You're taking away the scratch pad it needs to plan its next move.
And that single prompt caused a measurable 3% drop in coding quality.
They actually had to issue a global usage limit reset on April 23rd for all subscribers just to make up for the wasted tokens.
Wow.
But they aren't just fixing broken scaffolding. They're aggressively clearing out the old stuff.
Yeah. Just days before this postmortem, Anthropic officially shut off Claude Haiku 3.
And they did it with absolutely no automatic fallback.
None at all. If you were a developer using Haiku 3, your app just broke.
Just stopped working.
You were forced to actively migrate your application code to Haiku 4.5.
Yeah.
This is the first major Claude model lifecycle termination of 2026.
It establishes a very aggressive new standard for forced obsolescence in enterprise AI.
You can't just build an app and leave it anymore.
No, you have to constantly update your infrastructure to keep up with their release schedule.
Which brings us to the physical reality of all this software. Fixing these scaffolding bottlenecks and supporting millions of autonomous agents, well, it requires massive amounts of physical hardware.
Incredible amounts.
Right, and looking at the financial filings from this week, Anthropic essentially had to buy the physical world to ensure they never run out of compute again.
They are moving completely out of software economics and into energy economics.
We saw a landmark agreement announced with Amazon Web Services.
This was huge.
Massive. Anthropic committed $100 billion over 10 years to AWS.
$100 billion.
Yeah. In exchange, Amazon is investing up to $25 billion more into the lab. But the raw infrastructure numbers are what blew my mind.
The power numbers.
Yes, Anthropic secured 5 gigawatts of Trainium compute capacity.
I want to pause on that number because 5 gigawatts is an almost incomprehensible amount of power.
Right.
We are talking about the energy consumption of a small nation or, multiple major metropolitan cities.
Dedicated entirely to training AI models.
Exactly.
And it signifies a massive hardware shift. Anthropic is officially transitioning away from using general-purpose NVIDIA GPUs.
Right. They're moving on.
They're locking their entire future into hyperscaler-designed custom silicon. Chips like Trainium that are built specifically for AI workloads.
But the scale of their ambition means they couldn't just rely on Amazon alone.
Not even close. Just days later, Google committed up to $40 billion to Anthropic.
Wow.
$10 billion of that is upfront cash, valuing Anthropic at $350 billion.
Incredible.
This secures Anthropic deeply within Google's cloud ecosystem and radically expands their access to Google's TPU v7 Ironwood chips.
So Anthropic has successfully triangulated the world's two largest cloud providers against each other.
Yeah.
They secured an unprecedented multi-cloud hardware pipeline.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the bizarre financial loop happening here.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Anthropic is taking tens of billions of dollars from Amazon and Google in the form of equity investments.
Right?
But they're turning around and handing that exact same money right back to Amazon and Google to rent their servers for the next decade.
Yep.
Why are they just passing the same billions back and forth?
It sounds totally absurd on the surface, I know. Financial analysts are calling it the circular economy of modern AI.
Right.
But mechanically, it is actually the only structural way to fund 5 gigawatts of power.
How so? Like, why the loop?
Well, building training facilities of this scale requires immense upfront capital. You aren't just buying servers.
Yep.
You're building massive power substations. You're laying miles of advanced liquid cooling infrastructure. You're funding the actual fabrication of the custom silicon chips.
Right, it's heavy industry.
Exactly. The hyperscalers, Amazon and Google, they cannot justify spending billions to build those massive data centers without a guaranteed decade-long anchor tenant.
And Anthropic is that tenant.
Anthropic provides that guarantee with their $100 billion pledge. But of course, Anthropic doesn't have $100 billion in cash lying around.
Obviously not.
So in return, the hyperscalers provide the immediate equity investments that Anthropic needs to make that pledge credible.
Ah, I see.
The money loops, but the physical infrastructure gets built.
But securing gigawatts of power to build increasingly smarter models introduces a terrifying new problem.
It does.
Anthropic is struggling to actually contain the intelligence they are paying so much money to create.
And this is where the week's events took a very dark turn on the cybersecurity front.
We saw reports break regarding Project Glasswing.
Yes.
This is Anthropic's highly restricted preview tier for a model called Claude Mythos.
And we should clarify what Mythos is.
Right, Mythos is a model that is strictly withheld from the public because it is dangerously capable. It can autonomously discover and exploit zero-day software vulnerabilities.
It finds holes in global software before the creators even know those holes exist.
Exactly. But despite all the security, a Discord-linked group successfully breached the Mythos Preview between April 22nd and 23rd.
And the mechanism of that breach is the most alarming part.
Yeah.
They didn't use some impossibly sophisticated nation-state quantum decryption tool.
No. They literally just guessed endpoint URLs.
Just guessed them.
They found a weak spot and pivoted right through a third-party contractor portal. The breach brutally exposes that the containment of too dangerous to release AI is failing at the absolute most basic IT procurement layer.
It is the ultimate irony of frontier AI safety right now.
It really is.
You can spend hundreds of millions of dollars perfectly aligning the neural network. You can train the model to refuse dangerous requests and behave ethically. But if your third-party vendor leaves the digital backdoor completely unlocked with a guessable URL, your entire multi-million-dollar containment strategy collapses instantly.
And we know exactly how capable these raw models are because Anthropic explicitly told us in their own policy updates this week.
Right.
They published an update on their election safeguards ahead of the 2026 U.S. midterms and other global elections.
Which is very timely.
Very. They're deploying new behavioral fingerprinting against autonomous influence operations.
And that fingerprinting is designed to look at the pattern of how an agent interacts, not just what it says, to stop multi-step disinformation campaigns.
Right. Because their own internal red teaming revealed something terrifying. Without those specific behavioral safeguards, raw frontier models like Mythos successfully completed over 50% of malicious electoral interference tasks.
Over 50%.
The raw models are incredibly effective at manipulation.
This raises an important question, though. How does a society balance that level of raw, destructive capability with the geopolitical demands of global superpowers?
It is a massive contradiction. And, I have to remain strictly neutral here, simply reporting the facts of the week.
Of course.
But look at the tension. The Pentagon recently labeled Anthropic a supply chain risk amid an ongoing contract dispute over these exact ethical guardrails.
Right.
But simultaneously, the current White House administration signaled public interest in exploring military applications for that exact same Mythos model.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Mm.
look at the absolute whiplash of this reality.
Yeah.
Anthropic is locked in a high-stakes, highly public, legal, and political fight with the U.S. military over the ethical deployment of autonomous cyber weapons.
And in the exact same week?
In the exact same week, unauthorized hackers just walked right through the back door of a vendor's portal to access those exact same weapons.
Like crazy.
The high-level governance frameworks being debated in Washington are entirely out of sync with the basic technical realities on the ground.
But despite the glaring security alarms, despite the unreleased models breaking containment, and despite the geopolitical tension, the corporate world is moving full steam ahead.
They're not stopping.
Not at all. They are integrating this technology directly into the global workforce.
The enterprise market simply isn't waiting for the security debates to be resolved in Washington. The financial incentives are just too high.
Exactly. We saw NEC Corporation become Anthropic's first Japan-based global partner.
That was a huge announcement.
They're deploying Claude to roughly 30,000 employees worldwide.
Hmm?
This is a massive deployment.
Right?
It certainly validates Claude's multilingual proficiency across a global workforce. But more importantly, it proves its ability to clear the intense compliance and data privacy hurdles of the heavily regulated Japanese enterprise sector.
It really serves as the definitive blueprint for global, highly regulated corporate rollout.
Yeah.
If it can clear Japanese compliance, it can clear almost anything.
And it isn't just about giving employees a smarter chatbot to talk to.
Mm.
Anthropic also signed a $200 million multi-year agreement to embed Claude models directly within Snowflake's data cloud.
Wow.
That integration impacts over 12,600 enterprise customers globally.
This is all about data gravity. By moving the AI to where the massive pools of enterprise data already live, the entire nature of digital work changes.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, sitting at your desk next week?
Well, it means Anthropic is no longer just selling software. They're selling what they call the after software era.
The after software era. Let's break that down.
Sure. For 20 years, enterprise software was strictly top-down. Management bought a tool, like a database, and workers logged in and used it step-by-step to pull a report.
Right.
Now it's bottom-up. You don't buy a workflow tool, you buy an autonomous agent.
Oh, wow.
Instead of you pulling data from Snowflake to write a report, the agent lives inside Snowflake. It reads the data, reasons through the business problem, and emails you the finished report.
You've fundamentally gone from being a software user to an agent manager.
Exactly. Anthropic is rapidly positioning itself as the automated execution layer of the entire Fortune 500.
Well, we've covered incredible ground today. We looked at the billions in capital looping between cloud providers.
Yeah.
We discussed the physical reality of gigawatts of power. We unpacked unreleased models breaking containment through basic IT failures and the massive, unstoppable enterprise adoption that is changing how we work.
It is a lot to process.
It really is.
Yeah.
But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you watch this technology evolve.
It really highlights the central paradox of this new infrastructure we're building.
Exactly. AI is rapidly becoming our foundational infrastructure. It's our new cybersecurity shield, and it's our primary economic engine all at once.
Right.
And yet, models like Mythos models, capable of autonomously finding zero-day vulnerabilities in global software, can be breached by a Discord group simply guessing a contractor's URL.
Which is terrifying.
So the question is, who audits the auditors? When the next Mythos escapes its containment, not through a sophisticated nation-state cyber attack, but through a forgotten vendor portal, will we even know it happened?
That's the real question.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. You are now thoroughly caught up on what might just be the most important week in AI history.